Okay, now we're recording it.
We're recording. Okay, well, you missed the minutes. Well, good morning. Well, just to bring you up to speed, this is the Tuxedo Farms Local Development Corporation meeting of the Board of Directors on August 9th, 2023. The only thing we did so far was open the meeting and review the minutes from May 18th, which were approved unanimously by the board. We're now up to new business, year-to-date financial review by our friends at MuniCap. So there we go.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Stephanie Blair speaking. I'm not sure if you can see me. Jason G with MuniCap Incorporated is also here. Molly was not able to attend today. Molly is usually the one that goes over the general ledger to date. And I'm not sure if was a miscommunication in preparation for this meeting, but I'm not sure if Jason has that information to review today. So if everyone is comfortable with that, would we be able to skip that today and maybe have a follow-up call with Molly? I'm just receiving notice that has not been prepared for today.
Sounds like we don't have much choice then.
Yeah.
Well, can we go over what was in Ken's email about?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That's something, right? I mean,
sure. I mean, I guess, yes, let's, I guess if Molly can regroup soonest and let us know when we can see something, I guess that's about what we got, right?
Okay.
Well, you know, as you
I can speak to, I mean, I can speak to the requisition amounts that have been drawn so far and what we're looking at in terms of when we would go over budget over the $310,000. If so, I mean, that I can speak to. But I don't.
That's the
Okay,
critical
like
stuff.
I just wanted to make clear, in my role at MuniCap, I don't have access to the actual general ledger, but I do have the information of, what's going on per Ken's email. So I can certainly speak to that. And I wanted to loop that into the discussion for the upcoming budget. So I can certainly discuss all of that.
Okay, that's the meat and potatoes of what I was hoping for.
Okay, well, perfect. Okay, so not as much of an emergency as I was thinking. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the timing for the special assessment report, as well as just the general concerns for the budget, the O&M budget from related. So I know it was discussed in the previous board meeting to prepare the special assessment report for today, because I believe in the governing documents, the timeline for the assessment report is either July 1st or August 1st. So I agree we should move towards having the special assessment report presented at this time frame. But after that point was brought up in last board meeting, we regrouped internally and felt that for this year specifically, it might be a good idea to hold out as long as possible, for two reasons. One is the O&M budget that has been expended much more quickly than anticipated. As you all know, once related reaches that $310,000 budget, their options are to either incur those expenses this year and include a reimbursement for that in next year's budget, or to tap into the sewer contingency account and be paid out of that account this year. That contingency account is the account that has the $200,000 reserve requirement, which is currently not fully funded. So we felt it would be best to hold off again as long as possible. So related would have the best idea of how much in reimbursements they're looking at next year. The only way I think to most accurately calculate that were to go as far out, in this year, how many requisitions as possible to see, when and where they're going to get to that $300,000 budget. And then also with more requisitions coming in, we would all have a better understanding of what that budget is going to look like next year. So the O&M budget was $310,000 for this assessment year. To date, 5 requisitions have been submitted, 4 have been approved. The 5th requisition was sent around yesterday for review and approval. The total requisition so far is $735,000, assuming requisition number 5 is approved. If requisition 5 is approved, that leaves roughly $74,000 in the O&M budget for this year.
Can I stop you for 1 second, Stephanie?
Sure.
The 735,000 made my ears ring.
Oh, did I say 735,000? I meant
Yes.
235,000. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, could you
Yes.
repeat that number one more time?
235,000.
Oh,
thank
okay,
goodness.
well,
Sorry about that. Sorry.
no
My
worries.
apologies.
What's $500,000 a month?
No, I guess I need to finish my coffee. No, so the first requisition was 20,000, second was 50,000, third was roughly 25,000, fourth was 64,000, and the 5th was 75,000. So that totals 235,000 roughly. So again, roughly $74,000 is remaining in the $310,000 O&M budget this year.
So focusing on that word roughly,
Mhm.
so that 5 requisitions across 7 months. So, if I'm just trying to guesstimate, patterns, obviously went 20, 50, 25, 54, 75. Which makes it a little suspect to think that I could just divide what's been spent by 7 and project that, well, that's probably what the expenses would be, from August through December. So that could be a little suspect.
You don't think
Yeah.
you can?
I'm sorry?
You said you don't think that that's reasonable?
I just don't know if you could assume that.
I think actually you probably can, and here's why.
Okay.
This is all based on flow.
Right.
We're coming to the end of the summer, and barring hurricanes and general climatic weirdness, we're getting out of the summer rain season. It doesn't rain so much in the fall typically and in the winter. So one would expect the big overflow months to be tapering off.
No, I would agree with, and that was kind of part of my thinking. The invoices that come in under operation and maintenance, following the categories that were projected, and we might have to take a deeper dive just to see, are there any outliers that make you kind of think, is it following the projected patterns?
Is it a normal monthly
Yeah,
expenses?
is it, because, the expenses to do with infiltration and inflow, those are measured by rain charts a lot. And those are, the correlation is obvious, more rain cause more expenses due to that. Are the other ones insurance, blah, 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 those,
Yeah, well,
just.
Annual or
Yeah,
something?
that, so,
but our $310,000 captured all of those expected expenses, right?
hopefully,
Well, in theory.
in theory.
So we should be now 6 months, 7 months into the year, we should be at $160,000 something, right? We should have spent about half of it.
Right.
So I would say that the rest of it is the overages, and so we may be able to, it's the best numbers we have, I guess.
Right, and that's what I tried to put together in this email. But I interrupted Stephanie, and I didn't want to mess up your flow.
No, that's okay. It's all good discussion. So like you all are talking about, so the average requisition amount per month right now is roughly $33,000. So if we
Right.
were to take that average, multiply it by 12, we would get to 410,000. So conservatively, the budget this year would end up at 410,000 instead of 310,000. Now, like you all are talking about, if the flow to the plant decreases in the coming months, the budget would not, you know, hopefully the requisition amounts would slow down and we would not get to that estimate $410,000 budget, but it will likely be above $310,000. So that said, there will be a certain amount of costs that either related can incur this year or that can be pulled from the sewer operations contingency account. So my thought is that there needs to be a deadline where related is providing us their budget for next year. And B, we as a MuniCap needs to calculate the reimbursements required to reach that $200,000 reserve requirement in the contingency account. So right now, that contingency account is sitting at roughly $155,000 balance. So at minimum, $45,000 will need to be added to next year's budget to get that contingency account to $200,000. The issue that I see potentially happening is that we prepare the annual revenue requirement, we prepare the special assessment report sometime in October. We include a figure to get that reserve requirement back to $200,000. But then after we do that, we have to draw funds out of the account to pay related. So the account immediately will be short again. That would be looped into the following year's budget. So there's a possibility that happens.
I see an alternate scenario there, and I'd like Howard and anybody else to, and Chris. We set the user's fees, I guess we're calling it, as opposed to a tax revenue, for the sewer, Hamlet Sewer District. That's that $310,000 budget estimate. It seems pretty obvious why. Get the users acclimated to real costs of what costs to run this system, that they are exclusively responsible to pay the operation and maintenance. But according to the agreement formula, and I'm not exactly sure why, $55,000 of that 310 was used. Probably won't eloquently explain the rationale behind it, but that I'm sure was the number. So obviously we collected way more than that, and my thinking would be, well, why wouldn't we just pay the $110,000 difference and square that away? And maybe there's a reason why.
The we you're talking about is the town, Hamlet.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, the LDC theoretically could ask the town, Hamlet District, to pay up the overage this year.
So that's basically what I'm talking about as I talk from my right shoulder to my left shoulder, because obviously we're the same people here. So yeah, that's the mechanism I was thinking of, Howard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if the Hamlet Sewer District has collected more funds than it's being billed for by the LDC, the sewer district is sitting with extra money. If the sewer district the LDC could ask the Hamlet Sewer District to pay the total this year, and the sewer district, based upon what you're saying, has the cash available to do so. So
Yes.
wouldn't that solve the LDC's budget problem for next year and that Stephanie just described?
Well, you mentioned, Howard, if I heard you correctly, paying the total freight. I don't know if you meant just the overage, because that's what I was thinking, you know, the
Oh,
hundred.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
$110,000 overage, which maintains this $200,000 reserve requirement. And, you know, that's my thinking, but one of three, and obviously want to hear from everyone.
I'd like to get a reaction from Stephanie on that question.
Sure, so I have a follow-up question. By the town paying related, do you mean
Not related.
outside of assessment
Not
revenue?
paying, not the town not paying related, the town paying the LDC.
So the town covering a portion of the assessment requirement then?
No, the LDC has incurred excess costs for O&M, which is attributable to the hamlet's consumption of services.
Correct.
If the LDC said to the sewer district, you've used more than we allocated for you this year, you actually owe X in addition. Can you pay that X now so that we start next year fresh?
Well, under the documents, yes. Under the sewer
Yeah.
funding agreement, absolutely. The LDC has the right to ask the town to remit everything it collects with respect to the special assessments.
Mhm.
And as far as I understand, Chris, Howard, and anyone else, that they have a right to ask, but have a right to expect payment after January 1st.
But isn't this really contingent on the question of whether Related is gonna ask for the money?
They have. They have.
They have.
Yeah, they, you know,
Okay.
informally,
So-
Dylan basically told me, Ken, you know, listen, you know, and I think he's got a legitimate point, which I'll share. You know, we were allocated 100,000 gallons a day. We're way over that. At some points, it was 400,000 to 500,000 gallons a day. And so that was totally unforeseen. And they might even have to add us an additional tank. So my thinking is we'd have to pay come January 1st. Why, you know, people can say, well, they're Goliath, why can't they find $100,000? You know, why would we quibble about that for a few months, you know? We know we're gonna have to pay it, we collected the money. It's clearly a quote unquote legitimate expense, you know, we see what's going on down there and, okay, let me shut up now.
Well, let's
So-
pay now or pay later, right?
Yeah, exactly, and
Why
we,
make them pay and then we pay them when we have the money?
and still, I think we, to Stephanie's point, you know, we could wait until we're basically spent out the money, which would give us a clearer indication of what the real expenses are as long as possible. But just knowing we have the money, we'll pick it up when we basically have spent it out.
So I have a question. Do we collected 310?
Yeah, that goes in
So-
your tax bill.
Right, so that's how much we.
January 1st.
That's how much we collected.
Absolutely.
Plus that account also has a fund balance.
You're talking
In
about
the-
the
in the-
Hamlet Sewer
Yes,
District, which has
the
nothing to do with the LDC.
Correct, yes.
Absolutely, a big fund balance, well over $500,000.
Okay, so, yeah, so that fund balance will be used for actual repairs to the system?
Oh, yeah.
And the
yeah.
310 is used.
We're supposed for operation and
Operation
maintenance.
and maintenance, okay.
And so my thinking, extending this into 2024 is if to several people's points here, it looks like 100,000, 110, 120, the overage is gonna be worst case scenario moving forward. It's pretty reliable. I'd be with the other hat of town, not LDC, but, Hamlet Sewer District hat on. I'd say, well, we'd set the budget at 410 and bill people for that, and because that's what it's gonna be costing, and in this letter I'm talking about, explaining to people, let them know, this is probably worst case scenario, What's gonna affect that down the road is when Tuxedo Farms comes on board, they start sharing the operation and maintenance costs. The Hamlet Sewer District will always be responsible, though, for the flow that comes from the hamlet.
Right.
And hopefully with fixing the system, we get it well under 100,000 gallons, and all that overage stuff goes away.
Now, hasn't there been over the course of this year a question as to how much of the operation and maintenance should be paid by related? I mean, there was a discussion
There was
about
discussion
that
and it was
several
settled,
months ago.
and it was settled that they're paying nothing until they're sending stuff to it.
Even though they were paying operation and maintenance
Yes, they said, yes,
before.
that's true, but so what?
And that wasn't a big number that they
It
were
wasn't a
paying.
big
Wasn't it 30?
That was-
Yeah, like,
Yeah, but that was negotiated as part of the letter agreement and that was taken off the table. So
Yeah,
Okay.
it was the electric costs to keep the
and
plant.
the people showing up to make sure it's still
Yeah, like,
working.
I think it was $30,000 for
Something
the
like that.
year,
Okay, all right.
for the year. So, but, that's water under the bridge that we've basically.
Okay, so
So-
the action item, sorry, go ahead.
No, last question is, at what point, this is a Hamlet Sewer District question, but at what point do we determine what's operation and maintenance and what's capital, repairs to the sewer system? Because those are two separate things, right? And we just want to pay operation and maintenance for this.
Well, I mean, what's maintenance, after a warranty has expired, so to speak, I think that's part of the problem of having had a sewer plant that sat there for 5 years. I don't think we've,
But I think a capital plan with bonding is what we need to also look at. That doesn't
That's-
affect this.
That doesn't affect,
But-
you're absolutely right, but it's very simple. If it's inside the wall of the plant, or wherever,
Right.
if this was your house, the curb line, right? Everything upstream of that is
Right.
Hamlet Sewer District maintenance and operations and repair.
Right.
Everything on the other side of that line is the plant. And right now, nothing we've done except camera scanning the pipes is Hamlet repairs or maintenance. Everything is the plant, operations and
Okay.
maintenance.
and
So
that,
the
excuse me,
300
just to finish that
Yeah,
thought,
okay,
which I
sure.
think will be helpful. This is why, the Tuxedo Farms responsibility for the stuff inside the walls seems to happen when they have COs and people are, I don't know any other obligation of responsibility that related has. Maybe Chris or, is that clear what I'm saying? There are no users from Tuxedo Farms yet.
Right,
So
right,
they're not
yeah.
contributing to the operation and maintenance of inside the walls. We know the outside the walls from right now, the Hamlet Sewer District will never be on Tuxedo Farms. The Hamlet Sewer District's always gonna be responsible for that.
Right. So the 310 that we collected is what we expect the inside the building costs, operation and maintenance to be. So next year, we should not only budget, this isn't so relevant now, but not only budget for the 410, but also for repairs. Or we bond it, one or the other.
Yes, right, and we're working on that now, coming over what those numbers are.
And-
That's a separate.
I know it's
Thing.
separate,
But
but
that's part
Related a
of,
little
part
bit.
of my rationale for thinking, you know, maintaining the sewer operations contingency reserve. You know, I'd also somewhere in this conversation like to hear, you know, what the balances are in other accounts that was, in my mind, supposed to be used to carry us through 2 years.
right.
Those kind of funds, so I don't know if it's getting
well,
murky now.
I
what
think
we're
the
talking
action item out of this is, there's two questions. We need to, and this goes back to what was already said, we need to have a projection of what the overages are gonna be for this year, which will let us put a proper budget together for next year.
Right.
And it sounds like what we also wanna do is, once we have that projection, the LDC wants to go to the Hamlet Sewer District and say, we'd like you to make us whole now, please.
Or certainly before December.
By the end of the
31st.
year, whatever.
Yep.
So, which is fine, and there's no reason why we can't do that. It's either pay us before the end of the year, or we're tacking it onto the bill after the year, whichever you want, guys. So the question is, when do we need to have that projection done? I heard October. Does that give us enough time? I think it does.
Well, and, you know, that projection, I mean,
Or do you
a
want to?
lot of it's already out there.
Right.
You
Or we do
know?
it, today or next week based on the numbers we have now.
Well, preliminary budget's due September 30, right? For the town.
And Julie, we have a deadline,
For
with
your
the.
Paris, the Paris reporting deadline is October 31st.
All right. So then I'm hearing that we need to go with the numbers we have now as a best guess and get something by the end of the month.
Yeah, but you don't need to pay anything this month.
Right.
No. Right.
So you don't have to pay anything from the Hamlet to the LDC for a few months.
Right.
This is
This is the
74.
question of when are we going to finalize the projections of what we need, right?
Well, isn't that going to be by in the Paris report at the end of October?
It will need to be in the Paris report, but we also have to have it by the end of September so that we can make sure that we got it close to right in the preliminary budget. Unless we're gonna carry $100-something thousand that we have right now, in which case we could do it tomorrow.
Well, you know, my thing, in trying to set a budget for 2024, you know, I already have it in my head that it's $100,000. You know, it's going from 310 to 410, and,
For the sewer plant. Now,
for the Hamlet Sewer District,
budget.
assessment.
Okay, now, my last question is, there was in the report that, or in one of your emails, that the current the old sewer district is costing us $8,000 a month.
That's just
So-
that's not including, anything that Rob's guys are doing, but yeah, that's what we've been paying this environmental, consultant.
So does it relate a little bit to related because they're supposed to decommission that old plant? I mean, we're paying to keep it open, but they're supposed to
We're paying to
be
keep-
paying to decommission it.
We're paying to keep it open because our,
Overflow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with related.
yeah,
And-
we're the cause of it, so.
And in fact, what it is a liability of the town to Related, because Related can't proceed with their required work to expand the plant until that is decommissioned. Remember that the plant is currently sized to handle the load from the original first phase. For them to do full build-up, they gotta expand the plant.
Right.
In order to expand the plant,
They need that.
they need that gone. Now, they're responsible for taking it out, but if the town is still using it, that's a liability on the town, not on Related.
And until we get the
It'd be part of the
infiltration and,
budget.
until we get the inflow and infiltration things straightened out, thank God we didn't blow up the old plant, because that's been an
Yes,
important,
and-
fix.
And there will be some transition between the two, depending on timing, where we could switch completely onto the new plant, because we'll be receiving more product from related, so we'll be able to run it even with the overages. But that's a
But if that's 8,000 or almost 100,000 a year,
guess.
do we expect that to continue through 2024? Not related to this, but the assessment or the user fees are gonna have to go up to 510?
I mean, the actual expenses are trending in that direction. The only thing that'll, reverse that trend is the work done to mitigate infiltration and inflow. So we have plans percolating with Howard and Sean, to get a couple of piggyback contracts going. We've seen some improvement even with the work that's already been done. But it's been minimal, but we have a few, points of attack that should make improvements
But
reasonably.
you are correct. The town board, the sewer district needs to be is probably looking at about $500-something thousand in operating expenses for next year,
Right.
depending on how much it rains, depending on how much we spend on fixing pipes instead of flushing money down into the river. But
So you said you're working on a capital plan budget that we could bond?
no, I didn't.
No,
You
oh,
said that.
I see.
I said that we're working on our initial contracts that are actually going to be funded out of ARPA money to do the emergency repairs to the sewer, the worst offending lines in the collection system. At the same time, we have 3 vendors, so we're going to start, once we get the emergency work started, we're going to put together a full boat contract to repair the entire system so that we can get bids locked in and costing that's real. So then we can go looking for funding, whether that's bonding or grant money or whatever, but we'll have a project completely planned, completely bid, so that we're bonding a project, not bonding a study.
But, you know, that could lead to a question, I'll anticipate question, that, well, why are we doing this piggyback? Well, you know, it would be difficult to even put out an RFP right now.
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, no, the piggybacking contract that we were looking at, they've said the pricing would need to change. Okay, so we're not really gaining anything there, but we do have the spec from that contract that could, if we added the manhole rehabilitation to it, we could just go out to bid for those services, and we know at least one bidder
We
who's
have 3
interested in
bidders.
doing the work.
Yeah. So
Okay, well,
So
I mean,
that's the fastest way to get to the result, I think.
if that's the fastest way, I actually wasn't clear. I thought the whole notion of the piggyback was, we can get some of this work going, but, that
Yeah, that
solution,
would-
Howard, sounds a lot better.
Yeah, the
And,
piggybacking would have only been a quicker solution if there wasn't going to be a change in pricing. But since
Oh, okay.
pricing is all going to be changing anyway.
Oh, that, I wasn't,
And I'm
Yeah.
going to say that, you know, we're in the wrong meeting for this.
Yes, I
discussion.
Yeah,
understand.
no,
So, but-
it's related a little bit, but.
Yeah, so the piggybacking was a great thing if we could have gotten it up and running in June, right after we did the camera work.
right.
The company disappeared, there's a whole lot of history there. At this point, we should take a deep breath and see which way we should be going with it.
Well, I'm all behind that. Especially, I like the word Howard said, easier, or easiest, whichever of those. If that's the pathway forward, then, you know, we need to be working with Sean and Howard and
Yep, that's-
get that going as soon as possible. Okay, so again, 2 different hats, 2 different meetings. So to just recap, the overages right now are in the $100,000 range. I usually add up a little bit. So 100, 120, somewhere around there. And that helps drive what the town board needs to approve for 2024. And to your point, Michelle, isn't it more like $500,000? Yeah, if the situation continued exactly as is for 2024, which hopefully would not, yeah, but I still wouldn't be recommending us raising fees to the users $200,000.
Right, I know.
You know, so especially because if we take this action and pay this year and maintain the sewer operations contingency account fully funded at $200,000, you know, there's no danger as far as I can see.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm pausing now, and that doesn't happen often, so run with it.
Yeah, so back to just the budget overall, I think what is a good idea this year is for action items from Unicap, one, to reach out to Related as soon as possible, ask for their O&M budget for next year. To the extent that they go over this year, if and when they go over, I think it's probably best to tap into that contingency account because that's what it's there for. And then subsequent to that, with regard to a Related's budget next year, if you recall, this year the O&M budget that they submitted was actually $296,000, and we added a small contingency to get to $310,000. Another suggestion could be to have Related build in a stronger contingency for next year in case we run into this same situation where the O&M budget is still exceeding what they originally anticipated. If there's a stronger contingency built in, then the likelihood of having to tap into that contingency account with the $200,000 requirement will be a lot lower. And then it come 2025, there might be a small amount of replenishment that has to occur to reach that $200,000 requirement. Hopefully would not be as high. And by that point, you know, ideally the budget is a little more settled. The flow to the wastewater treatment plant is a little more settled, and that reserve requirement and amount, you know, ideally is not really touched. So this year would be the greatest replenishment to that account. Next year, there may be a little bit of drag, so to speak, due to the timing of after this year's budget is finalized and needing to tap into that account. And then again, it would settle out in 2025.
So to your point about contingency, I think it was in the 310, it was around 50. That was just on a contingency line, unassigned other than 50. And now, obviously, it's moving from contingency to actual expenses. In the Related's O&M budget for 2024, you know, which categories are going to be increased? I would obviously imagine the fees being charged to, for H2M personnel, H2O personnel, because of the amount of time they're spending there now, the chemicals used to treat the water. So those lines are going to increase actual identifiable expenses as opposed to just a blanket contingency, which just gives you leeway to figure it out later. So those lines are going to go up, and at least for 2024, until, again, we get inflow and infiltration under control, and the plant operates as was expected to be around 50,000 gallons a day from the Hamlet Sewer District, and boy, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is, yes, the action item from Unicap is let's get started on next year's budget.
Yeah. So we have a lot of preliminary internal like all of the internal work for next year's budget is done. The ticket item that we're missing obviously is the budget from related, but again, we wanted to wait to request that from them as long as possible so that next year it could be as accurate as possible based on what's going on this year. And you know, that reserve, on a second note, that reserve contingency account where the requirement is $200,000, you know, that money is there to be used in situations like this. Ideally, it's not always used, but when situations like this occur, that's what it's there for. There's, you know, roughly $150,000 in that account. I sure hope that the budget is, or the O&M budget for this year would not reach having to drain that account in full. You know, that would put the O&M budget at 460,000. That'd be very high. But that money is there to pay for the cost of these requisitions if and when needed. And it would be that amount to replenish that account would be looped into next year's budget. So I know you were talking about requesting, you know, additional money be paid now to cover the O&M budget. If not, it would be looped into next year's assessments. It would be looped into next year's assessments by way of the calculation to replenish that account if that account is used this year to pay related. And the money's there. So it might be a more streamlined approach if we did it that way.
To pay it this year.
No.
Correct.
No,
So
To use the sewer operations contingency account.
Yeah, but at what point do we replenish it? Next year? When
That
we
gets
have the money?
replenished as next year as part of the bill from the LDC to the Hamlet Sewer District.
that's correct. So Michelle, currently that account has about $150,000 in it. So right now we're looking at least $50,000 needing to be looped into next year's budget to replenish that account. It could be more if that account is tapped into before we finalize the report, or it could not. So then the assessments would be levied and collected early in 2024. That account would go back to $200,000. If it's needed to tap into to pay related, you know, it may drop again underneath $200,000, and then it would be replenished again in 2025. But I would anticipate the replenishment of that account to decrease over the years as the wastewater treatment plant operations costs settle.
Right.
So if we don't replenish it this year with the money we have in the Hamlet Sewer District, then.
No, it's
Okay,
looped into
then-
next year.
Okay, so then that goes to fund balance.
No.
Then we're,
You're talking about,
Yes.
you're talking about Hamlet Sewer District now,
Yeah.
as opposed to LDC, but okay. When you said fund balance.
So-
the Hamlet Sewer District fund balance will increase by the money still in that Hamlet Sewer District account. Rather
Yeah,
than,
yeah.
Well, the
rather
fund
rather
balance
than
is there.
replenishing it, why?
It's all a pile of money now.
Yeah.
right?
So we just keep it. and
We send
just
the
keep
bill, the
charging.
LDC sends a bill to the Hamlet Sewer District once a year and says,
Right.
this is what it costs to run the sewer plant next year or this year or
Right,
whatever.
okay.
It's all fund balance. The mechanism exists to replenish the LDC's contingency account as part of that requisition from the town, the hamlet.
So I'm just foreseeing a couple years out. So we don't take the money out of the Hamlet Sewer District to replenish the contingency now. We keep that in the Hamlet Sewer District
Yes.
account. We charge almost basically the same 410, whatever.
That went up $100,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to replenish and, whatever we'll need for the end of the year. Okay, so that doesn't matter. We still charge the 410. We take the money that's left in the Hamlet Sewer District, put that into fund balance, and then we use the contingency again in 2024.
If
And
we
then we
need it.
keep doing it like that, instead of coming clean and starting fresh.
But we're
we
gonna get
fill it.
billed. We're gonna get, it's.
I mean, it's okay with
The
me.
guesstimate
That's
was
fine.
310. And now it's gonna be adjusted to at least 410, probably 450, and again, it also doesn't factor in the Hamlet Sewer District's, obligation to keep the old plant running and the
Right,
collection
right,
system
right,
running, which has really nothing to do with the LDC.
Correct.
The Hamlet Sewer District will make the LDC whole, including the contingency fund, and we will assess them for the expenses for next year. So it will be clean as of whenever that check clears.
When we collect the
The question-
taxes for 2024, we'll replenish the contingency account.
We'll get a bill
Well-
from the LDC.
The town will get a bill from the LDC. They can send the money before or after they collect the taxes. It doesn't matter. It all depends on what their current fund balance is. The town is, the Hamlet is holding more money than we're gonna be asking for. So the question is whether there's any benefit to saying today, hey, Hamlet, the LDC wants our money now. I don't see it.
I don't
It's
either.
one more
The
thing
only
to do.
point, the only point I see is just the acknowledgement that guess what? You know, you better charge at least 410 next year. And as long as we get that in the budget for 2024, I don't see a problem.
Right.
No, it's just an interesting way to just keep moving it forward, because next year, it's 410, a good chunk of that will replenish the contingency, and then as we go to August or so, or October, we'll dip into the contingency again, and then we'll charge that replenishment amount in
No.
2025.
410 will cover the operating expenses. The bill that we'll send to the Hamlet is 460 for the operating expenses
Okay.
and to refund and refill the contingency fund.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear that part.
One question I would have, Stephanie, it's not clear to me, and maybe Chris and Howard also can enlighten me about this. I'm not sure why our original for 2023 bill to the Hamlet Sewer District was $55,000, and what would that number look like? Is there a set number in 2024 according to some kind of a formula?
Well, remember back then there was no flow,
Right?
right?
No rating method.
So it was just to start building up.
Just a number to get things going, so to speak?
Yeah,
So from this point on, is it supposed to be based on actual budgetary expenses? As opposed to $55,000 if
Yeah.
when Stephanie and Municap reach out to Related and they come back and say, well, guess what? Our budget projected for 2024 is $450,000. Would that be the bill that we'd be expected to get as opposed to $55,000? I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Yeah, so just to backtrack a little bit, the reason why 310,000 was not billed to the Hamlet district and instead 55,000 is because those escrow funds that were transferred from the town to the trustee covered a portion of the O&M expenses last year. So I believe that was the money that Howard was holding that was transferred to the trustee.
Yeah, it was about $330,000, something like that.
Yeah, 350,000 roughly, that's correct. So a portion of that was used to fund that sewer operations account to above $200,000. It funded the account to roughly $400,000. And then immediately 255,000 of that was put in the O&M account to make that O&M account whole at $310,000. This year, that won't happen as there's not a secondary escrow amount sitting out there to be transferred. And then secondly, the allocation of the assessments will change this year. In the very first year, the memorandum of understanding, the MOU outlined a specific percentage of assessments to each district. For the Farms District, it was 17.5%, 17.75%, or Hamlet District, excuse me. The Hamlet District was 17.75%. The Farms District was 82.25% of that $310,000 budget. This year, that will be different. It will be based on flow. There's a calculation for what to assess the Hamlet District. And then the remainder will be allocated to the Farms District.
Right.
We
and
have not
since
done
they
that
have no-
calculation yet,
Since
but it
they'll
will
have no
change.
flow in 2024.
Correct.
Obviously, I guess back in the day, the timing was expected to be that Tuxedo Farms was gonna have something going around by now and would have been different. Okay, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, correct. So last year, again, the O&M budget was 310,000. 17.75% of that was 55,000. Yeah, billed to the Hamlet District. 255,000 roughly was the remainder to the Farms District, but it was covered by that escrow amount because the Farms District is undeveloped.
Right.
Or was undeveloped. This year, whatever is allocated to the Farms District will be billed because it will need to be collected.
So in my mind, there's still some kind of a buffer there, knowing what is still left from that escrow funds. I'm not clear as to what kind of balances. Is there any other fund? There was like $50,000 in O&M sitting there. So are we somewhere around $150,000?
Yep. So the sewer operations account, that's the account that has to have the $200,000 requirement, is currently sitting, you're right, at roughly $155,000.
So in my mind, that gives this at least some kind of buffer. So if we collected 410 and it turned out, oh God, it could have been, including the other expenses to keep the old plant running, 510. Well,
You're mixing hats.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so at minimum, part of next year's budget will be a replenishment to get that contingency account to $200,000. That is one line item of all of the budgetary items. That is different than the O&M budget itself. So that's what, Ken, you were talking about earlier. If related to O&M budget is 410, there's also a $50,000 amount that will be assessed to get the contingency account to $200,000. And then the O&M account, so this is the account that started with $310,000 this year, is currently down to $150,000, but a $75,000 requisition is out there.
Right.
That account will sit at roughly $74,000 after this requisition. So what I foresee happening this year is that O&M account that has $74,000 in it will be drained to zero through the payment of the O&M requisitions. At the time that account is $0, we will then tap into the contingency account to pay related.
Right.
That will drop the contingency account likely back down below $200,000 at some point, either at the very end of this year or early next year. When that account drops to $200,000 in, let's say, early 2024, the replenishment to that account will occur in the fall of 2024, the bills that are paid in early 2025. That's what I foresee happening. And then second to that, I think it is important, just to be aware that the Farms District will be allocated assessments this year. It won't be covered by any sort of escrow fund that happened last year. So last year's annual revenue requirement was roughly 2.4 million, roughly 2.5 million actually. But a part of that was covered with those escrow funds. So only 2.2 million in assessments were actually collected. This year, if we take what we know, the debt service requirement, if we slightly bump up administrative expenses, if we estimate that O&M budget at $410,000, and let's say we need $65,000 to replenish the contingency account, we're looking at $2.7 million in assessments. Could be more, could be a little less, give or take, once we have an exact admin expense budget and the exact number to replenish the sewer operations account. But just to, be aware that a significant more amount in assessments will be collected, since there is not that escrow amount to cover. And that allocation will be different because it will be based on flow, not a set percentage.
Well, my guesstimate would be that the 310 will be expended basically by the end of September, based on the trends of where we're at. So we basically have October, November, December. We've guesstimated monthly expenses to be between $33,000, $34,000. So, this $100,000 right now seems about right to cover those 3 months. And if that money comes out of the $150,000 that's sitting there, okay. My crystal ball says you'd have about $50,000 left in that sewer operations contingency account. And, the town board, those people that I seem to be acquainted with, would know, okay, the supervisor's gonna have to project at least $100,000 increase to, and that's my target now, that supervisor's target number.
Okay.
But that's.
Yep, and then when Related gives us our budget for next year, we will include a larger contingency buffer. So last year, again, the budget that Related gave us was $296,000. We added a very small contingency to cap at 310. We can increase that contingency to make the O&M budget, a little bit more, and that should give a conservative buffer for next year. And if it's not fully utilized, then it would just roll into the following year as a surplus of funds to offset the following year. So eventually it would get used, but conservatively for this upcoming year, I think that would be a good idea.
So, that additional $500,000 in assessments, just out of curiosity, how does that affect Related? Is their head gonna explode and say, wait a minute, another $500,000 we gotta come up with? Maybe that's an irrelevant.
Well, Related is the owner of the undeveloped property. But unfortunately, that is the way the governing documents are written.
So, I don't know why I would be so concerned about Related's head exploding, but,
Maybe it'll give them a little push to get.
well, that's what I'm thinking, it seems like the only way out for them is to build as quick as possible and start getting some,
And sell it.
and sell it.
Correct.
And also, from expenses related to, this sewer district, get users that are paying it.
Correct. The faster they build the farms district, the faster they get away from paying special assessments to cover costs that they're incurring.
So,
Okay, all right. So the action items stands that Unicap needs to get information from Related and get a budget put together.
And you also wanted to decide how we were gonna pay for the overage, we're gonna use contingency, right? That's the decision.
We're not, that's the way it works
Yeah.
now. I don't see
But,
any,
I think, yeah,
right, I think you're,
right?
and as Stephanie was saying, that's clean because that's already there. That's why the fund is there. And, but the mechanics of it, we all need to understand is, well, you do have to pay that, you know? That contingency fund needs to be replenished. We will get a much different bill. It ain't gonna be $310,000 anymore. And so to prepare those Hamlet users, those geniuses on the town board need to assess
That's a,
differently for
that's
2024.
a different question.
Different question.
And I don't see that there's any benefit that offsets the cost, if only the cost in time and aggravation of making a special
Payment.
the special bill and payment back and forth between the two agencies.
No, the only thing in my mind was just making sure it's a clear understanding that you need to change the assessment to the users for 2024, and
Yes.
then there's no problem.
And the town board needs to look at making this not a tax and a fee so that it stops screwing with our tax cap calculations. But that's a different set of hats to be wearing, and that's not happening this week.
So I'm not sure if there's much else to discuss.
We had one other, I'm sorry, Stephanie, are you done?
Yep, I'm done. So like you all said, our action items will be to obtain related budget for next year. We will give some thought into an additional buffer contingency based on the budget they give us. We'll prepare the annual budget and report. Hopefully we can present that at the end of September, early October timeframe. And then next year, looking way forward, as we now will have a year and a half essentially worth of data and O&M requisitions, we can really look to doing the assessment report and role presentation in the July timeframe, July and August. Next year, we'll have 6 months of requisitions underway for 2024, and I think we'll have a good idea to confidently prepare a budget at that time for 2025.
While the thought is in my head, I think it needs to be factored in. There's oversight expenses that need to be factored in with the services of our town engineer, Sean Hoffman, helping to verify the invoices that I'm signing off on, are scrutinized, and we recently did that with the construction closing out of that 400 and something $1,000. Sean and I literally went to the plant, and he verified, yeah, work was done. But even these monthly invoices that we're getting,
You should pass those on to Related. Under the
they
agreement.
are, but
Okay.
if we're ultimately paying them, I don't know they have the same keen eye of watching expenses that, I'm not seeing the motivation for them. Let's face it, right now, Howard, Related is Greg and Dylan. They're not spending any time at that plant.
But Related has the obligation to reimburse the town for its engineering expenses associated with completing the project. So.
Yeah, with the completing of the project, yes.
And
I'm talking about on our end, just even verifying the monthly operation and maintenance invoices that come in. I've learned a lot about sewer plants, but not to the level that when I'm signing off on these invoices, I can say 100%. Oh wow, yeah, we got our money's worth out of that.
Okay,
Well, then I think what MuniCap should do is, just like they send Chris and I a letter or an email each year asking us for our anticipated charges to the district for legal services for the following year, they should send something to Sean.
That's exactly where I was going, and thank you for
Okay.
getting to the point.
Okay.
Because that is the point. I wanted to make sure that the town doesn't get stuck with that, and because I think without Sean, who actually is checking to see, these are legitimate.
absolutely.
Well, you're not, Sean's actually checking it on behalf of the LDC.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, he's
yeah. So,
verifying.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get straight, you know,
Yeah.
with all of these things that we do, that the right entities are being charged for these services.
Yep.
Since it's the same guy, it's easy to get that mixed up.
Yes, we should have a line item for engineering as part of the LDC budget.
Right, it's a good idea.
Okay, we're an hour and 15 minutes into our hour meeting. What do we got left?
Any jokes?
No, I think there's another agenda item.
Is there?
No, I think we covered both year-to-date financial review and discussion of the annual assessment report. I think both were discussed.
Okay, then we need to set our next meeting, and it sounds like we need to have it sometime in September. So, we're back to you, Stephanie. When are you gonna have something for us to look at?
We have an October 31st powers report deadline, so
Mhm.
we
So-
want to push related. All right.
You guys tell us what works and we'll get it on the calendar.
Stephanie went to iPhone. I'm not sure why, but did we lose you?
Yeah, I apologize. I think I'm on my phone. I think my computer might have just crashed. I'm not sure.
No
But late
worries.
September, last week in September, first week in October works for us. I'm not sure if you all can hear me.
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
You broke up for,
You can,
Very-
okay.
so I think we're looking at very early October.
Either Monday or Tuesday, the second or third?
Yeah, so last week in September, first week in October.
Do you want to do the 3rd of October?
That's a Tuesday.
I would prefer Mondays or Wednesdays to Tuesdays.
I don't have a preference, so I can accommodate that.
Week, if it's okay, Monday would be great. That's okay. The
Monday the
second?
2nd? I don't have a
I'm
problem
good.
with that.
I'm good Monday the 2nd.
What time?
I think Jay prefers early, so,
Yeah, 7:30 or so.
well, I'd be a one-eyed pirate. I don't know about that.
If we can keep it at 9 o'clock, if everybody can make that work, that would be my preference.
9 o'clock. I wrote it in pen. It can't be changed.
And Julie, you'll send out an invite?
Yes, I will do that as soon as we hang up so you can keep it on your calendar.
So on that agenda, we're expecting, what are we calling the report from related O&M report? O&M, budget for 2024. And, would that be, Stephanie, when, you guys would present, what were we calling, they were supposed to present
Special
today?
assessment?
Special
Budgets,
assessment
assessments,
report.
all that stuff. We will have to
Yeah,
take.
that's correct. So we'll have its O&M budget that we would have needed to do the special assessment report, so we can review that, and then we will review the assessment report and the allocation of the assessments.
You have to file the preliminary September 30, correct?
Yeah, but we
We can
have
just do a,
Oh, you're
That's
talking
just
about for the town.
preliminary.
You're talking about
preliminary
It's
for the town.
preliminary,
And we
the
can,
town.
and we have enough
Including-
information to do that.
Yeah.
We'll
okay,
put our thumb on the scale and then we can always bring it down.
because it's just.
So
Do that thing.
adjourn?
Mm-hmm. Unless anybody's got anything else.
Ready to adjourn? The ever popular adjournment? Okay, I'd like to make a motion. Well, first, let me thank everybody for assembling, and I think we all continue to learn. And, okay, so that's my wrap-up. I'll call this meeting adjourned at 10:18 a.m. Do I have a second? Seconded by Jay Reichcott. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. You could stop recording.
I'm gonna stop it.